Sham, thank you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi there. I'm Shiam. I am a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and I currently work within the Australian public health systems, but I look after people of all ages.
What made you decide to do Emerge's GP training module on MECFS?
I can only speak for my own experience. I don't necessarily represent the view of doctors everywhere or psychiatrists everywhere. When I was in university, we didn't really get that much teaching on MECFS. When it was brought up, it was almost kind of like phrased as something that was not necessarily like a genuine condition. It was like a mental health thing, but not necessarily like even like a known mental health thing. So it was kind of just like this, like, oh, these people are kind of like tired all the time, but they're probably actually just like depressed and like don't want to admit that they're depressed and like don't want to take treatment. From what I remember, it was like, well, mental health is already stigmatized, but it was like one more layer than that. We never had any lectures specific to people working with any kind of like chronic diseases like that, and I never had any exposure to actually someone, apart from personally, that had MECFS. So there was that. I guess there was me kind of like not really knowing much about it. Also, I like had like a really close friend who had MECFS. When she wasn't doing well, she kind of asked whether I could refer her to see a psychiatrist. And I think some medications were suggested. I'm not necessarily sure if she tried any or she didn't. And then she ended up dying by suicide. And so I think it's been 2 years and I'm still like processing how I feel. I have a really good friend from work who was also a psychiatric trainee, and he told me about the Emerge program.
How did your concept of MECFS change after doing the training?
I think what I realized was that MECFS is a syndrome, and when I say syndrome, I mean like it affects all sorts. You have all sorts of symptoms beyond like the fatigue that you feel. There are these symptoms that can't be explained by anything else that are very debilitating, and current treatments that are available or investigations that are available, like they don't necessarily work. What was really helpful and validating for me was seeing other healthcare professionals with a lot of experience seeing MECFS talking about how real it was and how like debilitating it was. In lots of ways, like it isn't a hopeful diagnosis to give someone, but they were really hopeful about like the things that could change in the future and the things that are helping now. And I have to acknowledge my training in medicine on like need to fix. And I think what I found with the Emerge training was that there is some evidence out there for some medications, and like and giving them over time at like very like small doses. And for me, I mean, we all know that the focus on helping with MECFS shouldn't be necessarily medication focused, but I think I remember the doctor was going through the trials about the medications that have been helpful. And like for me personally, being a doctor, like it made me feel like even though these haven't been replicated in like large studies, it also made me feel like there was still some maybe promising options that were like being worked on, and like that made me feel better within myself.
In Australia, it's estimated that over 80% of people with MECFS haven't got a diagnosis. What's the implication for their quality of life to not have a diagnosis? As a doctor, what are they missing out on?
We all deserve to be validated and for to be understood. Knowing that there is something that fits you and that you're going through, that it's genuine, can be like really powerful for people, and it can really impact their own life and how they feel themselves. And, I think there's definitely going to be a difference in how someone navigates the world, being like, oh, I have this thing, versus, oh, I keep going to these doctors and they say that there's like nothing wrong with me and no one's able to help me. So I think that like internal and external validation from healthcare providers and how you feel about yourself, I think like that can be really meaningful. From a medication point of view, there are some early trials showing that some certain medications could make some small meaningful changes over time. So then there's them missing out on that. I think there's the potential to do a lot of harm if people aren't given like a diagnosis early, because they end up trialing all of these interventions and medications that can be potentially harmful. And I think also in terms of, you know, getting support and things like the NDIS, if you're not given the diagnosis early, like it means that like your ability to even get the support that you need is kind of like it's further moved forward. What about you? What do you feel like people are missing out on?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
things you said, absolutely. So it's not just what they're missing out on, but often when you go to a doctor and they don't understand what your condition is, a good recommendation for people that are fatigued and you suspect are probably just depressed is exercise, which is incredibly harmful. So it's not
Yes.
just what they're missing out on as far as good things, but they're also getting these harmful advice.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, and missing out on advice on pacing, like how to not overexert yourself, which I
Yeah.
think, like for my personal story, um, I had a deterioration of health at university because I didn't really understand pacing. I knew that when I did too much, I was suffering the consequences, but I didn't quite understand that those
Yeah.
consequences could be permanent. And then when I was forced, I say forced, I was financially strong armed to do the graded exercise therapy program as a requirement to get disability support pension. And that was like the nail in the coffin for my health. That's why I spend all day in bed now. So for me, I think getting doctors that don't do that to patients, that can actually advise them on pacing, is crucial in a condition where there's no cure, and the treatments don't have a big evidence base, and what we do have doesn't help everyone. When you can't treat it, at least avoid deterioration of health, you know?
Definitely 100%. We used to recommend it, like the graded exercise therapy, and like that was really harmful, and it's made people worse. I think it's really important for doctors to just like know that it like does exist. We all know that we're meant to be doing bloods and a sleep study and like, or what we call like an organic workup to look for any kind of like physical health cause, and that's pretty standard. But just because all of those potentially come back negative, if someone is fatigued, it doesn't necessarily mean that like they're depressed. It could be something like MECFS. There are definitely people out there that like know um, what's going on, but it really should be something that we all know about. And I hope in the future things will change where I don't have to look on the website to be able to give someone like a recommendation for someone as a special interest, to be able to know that they're going to get the care that they need, and that like hopefully things will change and it will just be like, oh yeah, like I know this good GP, like they'll be able to look after you. Do you feel like things are changing now
I
or not?
I think the research is changing at a faster
Yeah.
rate than GP and doctors picking up on like
Yeah.
the need to know this. Like I'm so glad to hear you say that you think everyone should know this and you want a day where you don't have to look up on a website, because I agree. I couldn't find a doctor that knew this condition. Like, I had to settle for one that had no idea what it was. It stopped me from accessing the NDIS, which was pretty huge. But it would have been a lot worse for other people as well who might not even know what's wrong with them. Like, they might not know MECFS, they just know they're sick.
One of the young people I was working with, I spoke to another psychiatrist about it, and he was like, oh no, like I don't think that you should give them this diagnosis. It might be harmful. There's probably like another combination of like medications that you haven't tried that might be helpful. And I found that complicated. Why are we worried about giving someone a diagnosis like this if it might be useful for them? Is it because some people do believe genuinely that there will be a medication to be able to solve everything? I'm not sure. But I guess where we disagreed was that I don't think it would be a complication. I think it would be clarity. I think that like clarity is so important. And I think what he was thinking was that like, oh, if we give someone this diagnosis, it might make their life like worse for them. And I remember having that conversation with her, being like, does this diagnosis like resonate with you? And I think what she said to me was that like, it does resonate with me the most, which is why it's so hard. I think providing that clarity is important. It should be about acknowledging what's going on and figuring out where to from here.
It might be a depressing diagnosis to get, but we're sick even without that diagnosis. Like, it doesn't change anything about our symptoms and our reality. But it does give us, what was the word you said? Clarity? It gives us clarity, you're so right. And I think mentally it's important to be able to understand as a first step to coming to terms. And from a practical point of view, you're not just gatekeepers to medicines, you're gatekeepers to other supports, like the NDIS and the DSP. And for a condition where 25% of us are housebound, like, those things are so important.
Yeah, and you're so right. Being able to like live in dignity when you have like, you know, when you have like a chronic condition is so important. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think having that support prevents deterioration of health as well. Because I'll tell you, there's a story I read all the time among people in the MECFS community where they say basically, I am always in crashes. I know that overexerting is making me worse, but I don't have a choice. I have to work. I have to, make my meals. Like, there's no choice about those things, and I need the support, but I can't get it.
Yeah. That's so sad.
Yeah. But I think it's so good that you're able to give those diagnoses now. Because even if there aren't treatments that people respond to, you can do so much more good for them.
Totally. And I think if it's giving someone the ability to kind of like live with dignity and get the support that they need, I think that is really important. And then, with someone with MECFS having to work and exert themselves beyond their capacity would just be awful, because it, of course, like you already said, it would make you worse, and you can't necessarily recover from that like deterioration a lot of the time. So it is really important that people are able to get access to the support as early as they can.
On the spectrum of things that every doctor should know about to the things that are really more specialist territory, where would you put MECFS?
I think that like definitely it needs to be something that everybody knows about. I think it should be like a really compulsory part of like our medical education and like what we learn. You don't know what you don't know. If I hadn't met you, if I hadn't met my like other friend, if I hadn't talked about it at work and then been referred on to like the emerge training, like I I I, I still wouldn't have like known, which is crazy. And then I think about my patients that I've had discussions about MECFS, and I feel like I wouldn't have been confident enough to have that discussion or query that kind of diagnosis with them. And I probably would have kind of made them try like another medication or like go on and have ECT or something like that. And there are so many different things, parts of your life that it like impacts, right? Like you can have pain, you can have memory issues, you can have sleep issues, you can have like fatigue issues, you can, you know, have all sorts of headaches, you can have like flu-like symptoms, like, you know, you can um it can affect your digestion. So it's a very much a syndrome where it affects like every body system. We may all come across someone that we are looking after that has one of the a symptom that raises up a flag for us, even if we don't know about it, to be able to make a diagnosis ourselves. Like we all need to know that it is a thing and that it's something that people go through, and we need to know that like it's a possibility, and we need to know like at the very least, at the bare minimum, like where to refer people, and that just because nothing hasn't worked, it doesn't mean that there's nothing going on.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's been so good hearing your perspectives. You've said a lot of things that were really interesting because I've never thought about them from a psychiatrist's point of view, and I think your patients are really, really lucky to have you.
Thanks a lot, Annie. And you know, like I do think about you a lot because I think obviously I think about what you're going through, and I kind of want to be there for my patients that are going through like a similar thing. And you know, like I have a lot of like admiration for like what you're doing and how you're living your life.
Thank you so much for watching. If you think more doctors should be trained to understand MECFS and help us, please consider donating to Emerge Australia. At the time of this recording, they're running the Power Our Practitioners campaign to train more GPs. It costs $400 to train one doctor, and honestly, that's incredible value for the amount of good it can do. There are so many of us out there. Every doctor will see patients with MECFS, even if they don't realise it. If they can recognise us and help us instead of harming us, people with MECFS can have a much better quality of life. And if you learned something from this video, or if you think someone in your life should know this, feel free to share to help spread awareness. Thank you.